Another year in the life of the planet and its 4,500 million people. Pictured together as a family of 100, the Earth's population in 1981 was in fact anything but united. It's a class world. If our American family could spend £20 on their picnic, then the Britons or Italians could spend about £11 on theirs. One of the richer developing countries, like Mexico, can afford around £3, while the family from Bangladesh must eat for 18 pence. In fact, more than 50 out of the 100 can afford less than 75 pence for their meal. And these gaps got wider in 1981. Average income in Japan went up by $1,500 in the year, while the increase for India was less than $10. The family is divided, not neatly split into two camps of rich and poor, but sliding gradually downwards through every level of income and well-being. "1981's human stories about birth and death, water and health, land and food had the common theme of wealth and poverty. Meeting the family's needs means having a job. So in another year of world recession, it was the question of unemployment which everywhere made the nightly news.
It's been widely suggested that the recent riots have been fueled by high unemployment figures, and some forecasts today say those figures aren't going to get any better in the near future. Business failures in England and Wales are now the highest on record.
Zet nu geregeld bijeenkomsten tussen werkgevers en werkzoekenden op touw. De eerste jobbeurs van Antwerpen was een succes. 8% van de werkzoekenden vond een gepaste betrekking. Sindsdien worden ook in andere grote steden regelmatig jobbeurzen georganiseerd. In Groot-Brittannië is het werkloosheidscijfer inmiddels...
According to the latest figures on unemployment, the number of people out of work across the United States has reached 8% in statistics released today. Detroit has been particularly hard hit, with more than 1 million auto-related jobs lost since 1979. Black people are bearing the brunt of the downturn in what the president now calls the beginning of a nationwide economic recession. As the automobile industry turns increasingly to automated production techniques, workers find the number of jobs declining with fewer and fewer new ones available.
Ursache die anhaltende Wachstumsschwäche. Und dies sind die neuesten Angaben der Nürnberger Bundesanstalt für Arbeit. Die Zahl der Erwerbslosen sank im September gegenüber dem Vormonat um 32.500 auf 1.256.000.
Dans les rues de la capitale à l'appel des syndicats socialistes flamands. Ils protestent contre l'action du gouvernement, incapable selon eux de garantir l'emploi. Des syndicalistes chrétiens de l'ACV se sont joints à la manifestation, ainsi que des employés du livre et des ouvriers des usines Renault du Brabant. Ceux-ci redoutent plus de 3000 licenciements.
But from the global point of view, the most representative single image of unemployment in 1981 would be something else. It would be the image of an out-of-work young male in one of the great cities of the southern world. Tahona Silas is a 16-year-old Tanzanian who has been looking for work for more than 2 years. Today, Tahona stands trial. 2 assessors will judge his case in a magistrate's court in Dar es Salaam.
Hapa mbele ya mahakama hii shahidi nitakaotoa utakuwa kweli kweli mtupu.
Tahona is one among the 350 million unemployed in the southern world. To tell his story means reconstructing Tahona's 1981. But as his trial begins, we have no more idea than he has about how it will end.
I'm thinking about my family, especially my mother. How much she'd be ashamed of me if she saw me here. I come from a village in the north. Our family had 6 cows, and I had to look after them. I had to take them to water and bring them back every day before I went to school. That was my main job, doing that. Every day it was the same. My mother tells me about me and my sister. We were 2 twins, and that how it was a bad omen and that my father wanted to kill us. So my mother ran away, and since then she's worked very hard to keep us. We had a bit of land where we grew bananas and beans and some sugar cane. But that was the only way we could get some money. My mother takes it to the market and she tries to sell them. But I don't think she gets much because there isn't much money in the village. You could work from the day you are born to the day you die, and you wouldn't have 100 shillings in your pocket. Ah, the magician. Yes, he would come up from the town. I decided to leave because I wanted to see things for myself. I'd heard stories about Dar es Salaam from people who had been there, and I used to listen to football matches on the radio. We had lots of problems in the village. There are plenty of things you can't get there, like clothes, shoes. And some people went to town, and when they came back, they had bicycles. And I wanted a bicycle. Well, in the town, you had better prospects there. More chance of getting a job and perhaps getting some money. But I didn't even have a shilling to get to the next town. After a few days, I was very sad because I was worrying about how my mother would be looking for me and worrying about me. But I still didn't have the thought of going back. I had made my decision. It was better to go on. It didn't work. None of the trucks would stop for me. I thought I'd have to walk for weeks. But I just kept on going. I skipped on the train, and while the ferryman was coming around, I was pretending to sleep. When he got to me, I quickly jumped off. Later on, I got a lift on a vegetable lorry all the way to Dar es Salaam. Oh, I couldn't believe how big everything was. Oh, I liked the cars and the big buildings. Never seen anything like it.
Niliona tofauti kwa kuwa hapa wakati mwingine unapata pesa kwa shughuli unazozifanya.
When I got to Dar es Salaam, I never wanted to leave it. I never wanted to go back to the village. I was so happy here. All I had to do now was find a job. First of all, I went to a place around the market called Carriacou. When I got there, I saw everybody working. Some were selling fruits, some were selling vegetables, others were mending shoes or fixing anything you can think of. Oh, they wasn't organized. Some were in one corners, others were in other corners. Everywhere you went, you saw people working right there on the streets. I tried to get a job. I asked to join some of the people, but they seemed to be working on their own. It was really difficult. You had to have a place of your own and somewhere to get started, and I hadn't expected that. But I didn't want to give up. No, I didn't. I knew if I couldn't get a regular job, I had to live on my wits. Some boys told me about how to sell peanuts. They took me to the market where you buy maybe 2 kilos, which would cost you about 30 shillings. You take them back, then you wash them, then you dry them. Then you take some sand from the beach and heat them on a fire. But when you're taking out the sand, you have to be careful because it gets very hot. So you have to use a sieve to get the sand out. It looked pretty easy. After they're cooled down, you put them in plastic pockets and then you seal them with flame. You can get about 100 packets out of the 2 kilos, and you can sell each packet at a shilling. Well, the main place we went to was Independence Avenue. That was in the middle of town. Oh, you get the people from the town. You also get a lot of tourists there. There's a lot of police around there as well, which you have to be careful of. Because the councillors think that we are dirty people and that the things we sell are dirty. So we're not allowed to sell them. If they see us selling peanuts, they will arrest us because selling peanuts is not legal. To sell peanuts in the first place, you have to have a license. And when you get a license, you're supposed to have a shop. And I haven't any money to own a shop. Sometimes you can make about 60 shillings, sometimes not. I spend some of it on food, and some of it I save for a rainy day. Oh, the first time I got caught, I just sold 3 packets of peanuts, and 3 policemen came, and they grabbed me. They caught me by the arm and said, "Let's go, son." They took me to the police station, and they wrote their reports and locked me up in a remand home.
Kwa hiyo tunaona vijana wetu ni wadogo zaidi kuliko wewe ni mkubwa zaidi. Naona bwana, ucheze nao vizuri. Sasa tunakwenda kwa kuonyeshe wanakocheza wenzio.
Ndio.
Unapendelea ni mpira, bao?
Napendelea mpira.
Au bao kwanza tu?
Tuanze bao.
They search you when you get in there and take away everything. And then I was sentenced to 4 strokes of the cane. They took my clothes off. They poured some kind of spirit on my back. And then they put a wet cloth on it and caned me. And I can tell you this much, it really hurts. When I saw people walking to work, I thought if I was like them, I'd be very happy. Because you got regular wage. And I thought if I could get a job in the factory, it'd be 10 times better than selling those things. I tried to get jobs in the factories, but everywhere there was no vacancies. And when there was vacancies, there were long queues. But usually there are just no vacancies.
Now, for the time being, we can't take anybody, in this factory because we don't have the raw material to manufacture what we are manufacturing here. You can see these machines now are just idle because we don't have the raw material. We use rubber, which we have to import from abroad, for which we need foreign exchange to buy it. Now that we don't have the we don't have the foreign exchange to buy the rubber, we cannot import it, and so we cannot work in this factory. Therefore, the people who are waiting outside for jobs, really, they just have to go home because we don't have the job to give them. Even the ones that we had have had to be sent home.
No, I'm sorry. We are in fact required to reduce the workers, mainly because we are not able to utilize our capacities fully. The main reason is that we cannot import enough oil on account of the oil prices having gone up very high. Now, if you see the furnace where we are using the oil, the cost of fuel has gone up by nearly 10 times during a period of about 7-8 years. We could be employing, with this installed capacities here, at least 2,000 workers. So 900 workers are out of employment, which they should have been getting the employment from these factories.
Unfortunately, there are problems which are completely out of our control. For instance, world prices of sisal have over a period of very many years continuously dropped. As a result, we cannot maintain our estates, and therefore the number of employees that we can take on are getting less and less.
Mimi baada ya kusha kuona mikasa inazidi mara kamata mara hivi nikaonelea kwamba kwa sababu
I'm not getting anywhere, so I've decided to go home. Well, I thought of going home many times, but I wanted to save enough money to bring back my family something. But now things have got so bad. I cannot get any work, and the work I do is selling peanuts. And every time I sell peanuts, I get arrested. I cannot get any money, so this time I'm really going back. I didn't have much to pack. I was staying with this woman doing her housework. She wasn't paying me, but I was doing the work for a place to stay. She was always complaining at me how I didn't do her work properly. And so I was glad to be leaving.
Kulikuwa naanguza mume wangu mashati
After I'd left, she came after me, nagging. She said that I had stolen her clothes and that I was in bad trouble and she was going to call the police onto me. When they searched my bag, of course they didn't find anything, but they still arrested me.
Kwa hiyo una uwezo wa kuondoka kuelekea mahali pengine.
And that is why I'm here today, accused of stealing. I finished my defense, and all I can do now is wait for the verdict. It all depends on the two assessors. The first is saying that the evidence against me is not complete. But they know I've got a record, and I could still get 2 years in detention.
Kwa hivyo mshtakiwa, ushahidi hauonyeshi kuthibitisha shtaka. Kwa hivyo mshtakiwa hana hatia. Ushahidi tulioupata hakuna hata shahidi mmoja aliothibitisha.
The second assessor is saying that there were no eyewitnesses, so that's got to be in my favor. But it shouldn't be long now before I know one way or the other.
Baada ya kutoa mwongozo kwa washauri ili watoe maoni yao kama mshtakiwa anayo au hana hatia. Kutokana na sababu hizo, shtaka hili mahakama hii kwa pamoja inalifuta chini ya fungu 32.
On the 23rd of September 1981, in Primary Court 4, Kariako District, Dar es Salaam, Tahona Silas, charged with theft under Section 32, Amendment 3, was found not guilty and acquitted.
Mahakama ya wilaya ndani ya siku 30 kuanzia leo. Hivi mshtakiwa faheri.
So Tahona goes free, but he still doesn't go to work. The reason why Tahona and more than 1 million other Tanzanians couldn't find a job this year was the poverty of their country. And the reasons for that poverty are bound up with raw material prices, international trade, energy costs, investment finance, global issues. It was to try to resolve such issues that world leaders were preparing earlier this year to meet in Mexico for global negotiations. One of Tanzania's delegates was Economics Minister Professor Malima.
We actually find ourselves in the international arena as passive partners. We sell what we produce at whatever price we can fetch and buy whatever we need at whatever prices we can get. We have absolutely no role at all in the whole process of price-setting mechanisms, what is going on. So naturally, we have been, as members of the Group of 77, as well as from analyzing our own domestic situation, we have been great exponents of global negotiations issue, both in terms of the need for it, that these countries like Tanzania's are in serious problems, largely because of factors which are not of their own making. They have no control on them, and the international community has a moral responsibility to assist these countries make the adjustment. What Mexico will have to appreciate and come to grip with is the fact that, it's not just the fate of a few officials and bureaucrats and so forth attending there at stake. It is the fate of millions of innocent, well-meaning, decent individuals.
The Sheraton Beach Hotel, Cancun, setting for the first meeting of presidents and prime ministers ever called to discuss what can be done about world poverty. The world's media was there to greet them.
President Reagan, one of the first heads of government to arrive today, is facing a difficult conference. He's said privately that he expects it to be hostile. He believes in development through private enterprise and investment, what he calls the magic of the marketplace. But that's a notion unlikely to appeal to the socialist third world countries of Cancun. It was Mrs. Thatcher's turn. one in the line of 21 visiting heads of government to receive the identical welcome at Cancun airport. And a conference held to discuss some of the world's most urgent problems began with all the solemnity of a Mexican fiesta. The Sheraton, a hotel built in the style of a Mayan temple, will be home for a little over 2 days to the leaders of 22 countries, 8 developed and 14 developing. Conditions of some luxury in which to be discussing the miseries and privations of the poor half of the world. But the session started with the 22 delegations facing each other in a circle of countries across a room full of flowers. Mrs. Thatcher between the Swedes and the Nigerians. President Portillo, in his opening remarks, told the delegates it was their duty to build a new system of economic relations. World poverty threatened them all. It was a problem that belonged to them all, and so did the solution. The conference will be judged by what it does. The test will be whether or not there's a commitment to global negotiations to change the existing structure.
To see why that structure needs changing means looking inside it. Aid. In 1981, $30 billion flowed from the north to swell the coffers of the southern world. As a percentage of the rich world's wealth, it was less than 20 years ago. Commercial loans. $35 billion flowed from the north to help finance the South's development efforts in 1981. But loans with interest have to be repaid, and this year the South paid back almost twice as much as it borrowed. Total repayments to the north, $60 billion. Raw materials. In 1981, payments from the north for the commodities of the south totaled $145 billion. They were the South's biggest money earner. Flowing back, the raw materials themselves, copper, cotton, coffee, to feed the people and the industries of the north. But the capacity to process such raw materials can add 8 times more to their value and bring both jobs and profits to the industrialized world, a massive economic advantage. Manufactured goods. From the mainly industrial north to the mainly agricultural south flow the machine tools, tractors, pumps and pipes and a million other items of hardware which the South imports for its economic and social development. But in return will go 2/3 of the South's 1981 income. Over $160 billion in hard currency. A major boost to the economies of the North. What all this adds up to is a distortion of the world economy which threatens the development of the South, and with it the renewal of progress in the North. That was the argument of the South's leaders in Cancun. But the reception seems to have been cool. The talks at Cancun were talks across a divide between those who believed that market forces could still untie the knots of poverty and those who had lost faith in the present economic system and believed that government should intervene to correct its distortions.
Market forces tend to ignore the very poorest and the weakest. Now, in countries where the poor form a fairly large majority, we cannot afford to ignore them.
In the informal statement that came out of Cancun, global negotiations were referred to the UN for more negotiations.
That is obviously a compromise text. If you point out that it begs the question, I would agree with you.
The main interest of the industrialized nations in Cancun centered on energy. To refuel their own economic growth, they need reliable supplies of oil at stable prices. But the energy question in 1981 also looked different from different sides of the table. As this year comes to an end, the total worldwide consumption of energy for transport and heating, in homes and in industries, is going up by 1 billion barrels a week. The final total for the year is likely to be the equivalent of 51,000 million barrels of oil. But energy, like food, goes to those who can pay for it. Every time the United States draws from the world's energy pump the equivalent of 50 barrels of oil, a country like India draws rather less. The equivalent of only 1 barrel of oil. And for oil itself, the South has to pay in hard-earned dollars. But for half the world, the main source of energy in 1981 was not oil, but wood. So from the point of view of the majority of the human family, the energy crisis was the destruction of trees. Under pressure from both increased firewood collection and increased commercial logging, the world has lost more than 25 million acres of trees in 1981. The result is that exposed soils are worn away by wind and water, and deserts are advancing onto land which once grew food. To develop other sources of energy, a special fund was proposed by the southern delegates to Cancun.
A number of them have been saying, look, one of the most urgent needs is to get more money to develop energy resources in the developing countries. It may be from the sun, it may be from geothermal, it may be from wind, it may be from tide. But they want more money to develop it there. And so it was proposed, in this terrible jargon we use, that we have an energy affiliate to the World Bank. Now, if that will attract extra money that then goes by way of investment to them, we're all for it. The acid question is, will it?
I do know that most of the interventions this morning mentioned that they would like to see a World Bank energy affiliate. I still do not see that, and the United States position is still that we do not see the need for this.
But demand for a fairer world economic system to help solve the problems of energy and poverty did not appeal to the US.
We are going to focus the actions in the global area on the concept of growth, economic growth as distinct from redistribution of existing shortages.
The third world countries seemed least satisfied with what happened here. On the most difficult issue before them, they agreed to go back to the United Nations to look for a way of starting so-called global negotiations to deal effectively with world poverty. Even this agreement had reservations to it, insisted on by the Americans. But the fact that President Reagan was there at all.
Governments, of course, are not the only agents of change in the world. Changes more often come from poets and philosophers, scientists and soldiers, rebels and priests, but most of all from ordinary people. And in 1981, many such people made their own responses to the global issues on Cancun's agenda, the issues of poverty and economic growth, energy and environment. So how ordinary people struggled to change the world they lived in is our final story of 1981. It's set in one of the wealthiest nations on Earth. Norway, where average incomes are now higher than in the United States. Over the last 10 years, the country's rate of economic growth has been half as fast again as America's, and its rate of increase in energy consumption has been the highest in the industrialized world. It's a rich country with some rich country problems. A derelict building near the centre of Oslo has just been taken over by young squatters. Berit Gronvold is a trainee social worker assigned to visit the squatters. For many years, Berit worked with the problems of underdevelopment in poor nations. Now she's coming face to face with the problems of overdevelopment in a rich nation. She's one of thousands of people working for global change from within the rich world in 1981.
På globalt basis. Er dere klar over at vi bor i et av verdens rikeste land?
The teenagers now living in this house are not poor. Almost all of them are from middle-class homes in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Berit herself left school at 16 to work in a shirt factory. 8 years living and working in Africa and Asia brought her up against the issues of hunger, ill health and unemployment. She worked in an orphanage in the Philippines, and eventually she and her husband decided to adopt 2 Filipino children. 5 years ago, the Gronvolds returned home to Oslo.
Well, when we came back to Norway and to the Norwegian society, it was really a shock because the society had changed dramatically. Everybody had everything. Well, that was the feeling we got, you know, and especially the children. They had changed. The way they behaved, they were confused. It was really a shock for us to come home. And this came to a head the first Christmas we had in Norway. Because, of course, my families and all our friends, they really wanted to do something special for us because we had been out for 8 Christmases. And the house were filled up with beautiful gifts. The children had about 20 each. And we were packing up all these beautiful gifts. And I must say it was a disaster for me and also for my husband. We were thinking about what would our friends in the Philippines and in Kenya have for the same Christmas. So we decided to write our families and talk it over with them that we didn't want all these gifts, all these commercial things. No. We also decided to lower our standard of living as much as we could. Not dramatically, I tell you, and we haven't got very far. But we don't buy clothes. We go to second-hand shops, and this is one of the ways I can do something by giving my own children different values. If you don't have the new car and the clothes, it's very easy to call you a loser. But I think a very big group of people in Norway now have decided that there is other values. We are a family of 6 children, and Ebbe, my husband, he is a civil engineer. And I feel that my family, they have reached further than I. Lars, he is now 17, and he repairs old bicycles. He gets from different people and send them to Zimbabwe. Doesn't come to a big production, but that is his way of trying to do something. He has to go to school, but he'll use early in the mornings or in the afternoon. Norway has, of course, developed tremendously, but now all the wealth has turned against us, giving us the feeling if we don't have it, we are not worth anything. And I really feel the same when I'm shopping. I have to be very conscious to tell myself again and again, you don't need it, you don't need it, you don't need it. And sometimes I'm not succeeding, you know. I'll come home with things that we don't need. And I'm very, very lucky because my children then will say, oh, so you've been out shopping again, huh? I am also very concerned about the food we are eating and the way we are preparing it. We have a grinder, so we can grind the wheat and the flour, and we can make our bread. I found my husband, he is very happy when he can make food for his family. We use a lot of vegetables. We use fish and milk and cheese and whatever, but we use very, very little meat. I feel that we have gained by lower our standard of living, if you can say that, because I don't feel that, you know. We are using less meat, we are using less on clothes, we are using less on car or whatever, but we are getting much more back. Because the children are very proud when they have made their dinner, when they have mended their clothes. Look, they will say to me or to Daddy, what I have done today, what you think about this meal. And then to sit there and share this meal together. I think it gives us much, much more than if we had a big dinner ready-made from the supermarket. But it's not only one family. But in Norway, there is an organization called Future in Our Hands. And it's a group of people really concerned about the third world and about our own situation, what it does to ourselves. So to be with these people give us the strength to continue. It was introduced to us by a book that gave us a real simple whole picture of the situation of the world today. The book was called Future in Our Hands by Erik Damman.
I was in advertising at that time, and I felt it actually as a rather bad thing to try to influence people to buy and use more and more, as long as I knew how the situation was out in the poor countries. But when I talked to people about this, I felt that they couldn't actually bring all these problems in over them. They felt that they had enough problems themselves, and therefore I found that maybe what I need to tell people is that it's actually the same problem, these we see in the poor world, and the problems we face ourselves in our country. We have felt we have to have this economical growth, and we saw that this was followed with a better quality of life too. The quality of life was increasing parallel with the standard of living. But at a certain point of time, I think about 1960-65, it seems from different figures that this was no longer true. We saw more alcoholism, especially among young people. We saw an increased use of nerve medicine. We saw an increase in criminality, youth criminality. We saw how stress would give people nerve problems and increased trouble in marriages and so on. So actually, there are many reasons to say that the quality of life was from then reduced in many ways, measured by human values. And therefore, it has been important for us in the Future in Our Hands to try to prove, to show to people that the problems we feel and the problems in the third world are actually connected. It's more or less the same problems. They are all connected to the economical growth, the competition for growth in the rich countries and between the rich countries. And when people understand this, that it's not only a question of forgetting themselves and helping others, it's also a question of helping themselves. And when they understand that they do not necessarily do the big heroic things, it's just a question of taking part, by taking one little step in the right direction instead of always accepting to be manipulated to go in the wrong direction. That's what it's all about. Some months after the book was written, I had actually several thousand letters from people who wanted to take part in this. And together with a group, we found that we should try to establish a sort of popular movement. And we advertised a big meeting. And well, people thought we were crazy because we chose a big meeting place with seats for 2,000 people. And they told us, this is ridiculous, you want not even 1/10 of it will be full. But I think it was the biggest moment in my life when I entered that room and saw not only 2,000 people, but I think about 3,000 people in there sitting on the floor, on the window shelves, all over. And this proved to me that in a way, the development, the politics had suppressed these ideas, this interest in another development. So it really proved that it was necessary to start a movement like this and to give people ideas and possibilities of taking part in change.
Since then, the Future in Our Hands movement has increased its membership to 24,000 and is now spreading into Sweden and Denmark. Volunteers like Berit run its information centre and send out the movement's magazine, Folkevet, or Common Sense. For the magazine, the main news of 1981 has been the rise of people's movements across the industrialised world, as more and more people are campaigning against the consequences of overdevelopment. For the Future in Our Hands movement itself, 1981's symbol of that overdevelopment has been Norway's own commitment to more energy and growth at the expense of other and older values. The conflict centres on a point in the far north of Norway, just inside the Arctic Circle. This is Sami land, which used to be known as Lapland. It is here, at Alta, that the Norwegian government is proposing to build a dam which will generate 425 million kilowatts of electricity. The price is the flooding of an area crucial to the herds of reindeer on which the Sami people depend.
The area flooded won't be so big, but this will have dramatic consequences for the Sami people. They have lived up here for more than 2,000 years. You'll find rock paintings that has been made 2,000 years before Christ. And it shows us the same patterns of reindeers as the Sami people have today. Their way of living is a very significant balance with nature. You can see that when you go up to the wilderness, how very little you have to destroy the nature, to destroy the whole community of the Sami people. The reindeers are the main income for them. And when the government take out a small pocket of this area by building out this big dam, the reindeer will not have the right places to go into. But the real terrible thing in this story is how can they fight against the big society? Who will help them? This construction work is going on now.
Endelig brudd med norske myndigheter.
This week, when I came up to Alta, the Sami people were still trying to find ways, diplomatic ways, with the Norwegian government to find a solution for the problem.
Bryte samarbeidet med norske myndigheter.
But in this meeting, it came very clear that there were no more. They didn't have any more arguments. There wasn't any other way, the Sami people say, because we will lose the rest of our pride, having to withdraw again and again and again until there is nothing left of us. We have to stand up and act. So people from every part of our country are coming up to Alta to demonstrate that they are against our government decision, and they has to walk through the night to chain themselves to the big machines.
så de hadde røde anorakker stort. Ja. Så jeg vet ikke om de har tatt den før de fikk slenka seg til. Neppe.
The police, they have to come and take the protesters down because they are breaking the law.
Det en underdel, så det ligner en sånn sak som nevnt over.
Ja, det en av de der små. Ja, det han som ligger her, tror jeg. Hent det beiset. Forsiktig, forsiktig.
To be a Norwegian for me has always been a big pleasure. I've been traveling around the world and it has been so good to be a Norwegian because of the freedom, of the understanding. Now I feel we don't have this freedom anymore. People who believe in economic growth have taken over, and people who believe in other values of life are being rolled over by bulldozers.
Får du navnet skikkelig personal, ja, nå? Stå på, folkens.
We have to choose. We have to sit down for a minute and think, do we really need more energy? I don't believe so.
If the Norwegian Parliament were to decide against the Alta project, it would be a decision based on different priorities for Norway's own development. So the dam is a symbol of an even more fundamental issue, the values of the industrialized nations and the impact of those values on the human family as a whole. That's why, in 1981, delegations from the Future in Our Hands movement have held a series of meetings with Norwegian politicians. And the issues on the table are not so different from those at Cancun. Leif Holbæk Hansen, Professor of Management Economics at the University of Bergen.
People are hungry. People are without work. Inflation is taking place. I think we have to look for some other ways of handling this. And I've been working with alternatives for quite a lot of years. Feeble ones, but still, they exist. A group of farms, wholesale outfits, some mill and shops in this country have managed to get together and work together on on principles which are based on principles which are not common in international trade. And I hope myself that we will be able to extend this experiment to an experiment also including groups in development countries. And I feel that the strategy of war games should now be exchanged for strategy of cooperation. I think it's high time, otherwise it will be very, very costly.
What the members of Future in Our Hands would like to see is a Norway which would become the first industrialized nation of its own free will to say enough is enough. More energy and more growth, they believe, is no longer the priority need. And what they want is a new kind of progress, for the sake of the third world, for the sake of the environment, and for the sake of a better quality of life for the people of Norway themselves.
I do think that ordinary people can see very clear the whole situation of the world. And I do believe that ordinary people also can decide how to live and take the future in their own hands.
Berit Grunwald, Tahona Silas, Santos Hernandez, Canta da Silva, Salah Hamshali. 5 people whose lives have been a part of a slowly changing world in 1981. They are all unfinished stories, except that on November the 18th, Santos Hernandez heard that the government of Honduras had recognized the campesinos' claim to the land they had invaded. Today, the families of La Colorada are farming the fertile valley floor. Of the others in our story, there is no further news this year.
Parkway free and clear from the Beltway down to the District Line. Route 50, the John Hanson Highway, beginning to slow through Cheverly, and the usual...
PSG International up 1.5 at 20, and Reardon Smith up 9 at 161. Gold shares recovered in 9 at 5.
The only counter value they can offer the West is virulent anti-Semitism.